All right. Some of you may think I'm literal. Some of you might think that I'm metaphorical, allegorical. Some of you may be just like me, and some of you might not be like me at all. But it doesn't matter if you think I'm real or a poem. It doesn't matter if you think I'm physical or if you're not like me or like me. What matters is I impacted every single one of your lives. I impacted everyone's life on earth, and I am the reason Jesus is. So let me tell you how it all began. Boom! I just was. I didn't grow from a tree or come up from the ground or jump out of the water. I didn't fall from the sky. I just became. I looked around and I saw water, I saw land, I saw trees, I saw sun and stars and sky, and then I saw other animals running around, and they looked just as confused as me. They didn't know what had happened. These animals, some were big and round, and some were small and tiny. And as I was looking around, I saw this one animal. It was a fuzzy little half demon, half ninja looking thing. And it was kind of pathetic. But I looked at myself, and I had these mighty arms, and I had this beautiful face and a mustache. And I was the most beautiful creation. I was also the most crafty. I was the craftiest animal to be created. And as I was looking around, I felt the warmth of the sun on my skin. And I started basking in its glory when I heard a big bang. And I ran to where that bang came from, because this was my earth now. And I needed to know what just happened. So I run over to where it is, and I see man, formed from the dust, breathe into life. And there was something different about man. He was in the image of God. And I'm not talking about a physical looks like God. I'm talking about God was with him. Something was there. He was like God. And the man, he was kind of like me, a good looking dude. But he's talking to God, and I hear God very clearly command the man to not do one thing, and that was, do not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, because when you do, you will certainly die. So the man goes about life, and God starts calling animals towards him. First, we have elephants come by, mosquitoes, alligators, pigs, and those little demonic ninjas were called cats. And then I get called. And I didn't want to go, so I tried to resist, but this urge to go forth came from within, and I went, and I was called serpent. So there you have it. Serpent. The craftiest animal, yet, in my opinion, also the most beautiful. So Adam looked disappointed after he finished naming all these animals. He looked sad and lonely, and he falls asleep, which was confusing because he literally did nothing, yet he was tired, and he slept. So there he was asleep, and I start walking over to give him a good sniff because I wasn't too sure what he was yet, and his body started opening up, and a rib came out of him. And I took off in fear, because next thing I know, there were two of them, and they were multiplying in the most gruesome manner. There was this object that looked just like him, but a little bit different. And he wakes up and says, "You are bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. You will be called woman, for you came from man." And there you have it, two man and woman, both in the image of God. Both in God's likeness. And life went on after this. Life was good. There was no fighting, there was no disobedience, and I couldn't stand it. There was no violence, there was no hurt, there was no pain, there was no suffering. Everything was good, very good. And I did not like it at all, so I needed to change this. I needed to deceive them into eating that fruit that God told them not to eat. Because, well, in my opinion, death has a nice ring to it. So I came up with a plan. I thought all day and all night, and it hit me. God commanded man not to eat from the tree. So man heard it firsthand what not to do. But woman, well, I wasn't sure if she had heard the commandment or not. So I came up with my plan. The next time I saw her near that tree of knowledge of good and evil, I was going to pounce. And my opportunity came quickly. So I see her approaching the tree, and I ran forth, and I asked her a question. I threw my arm around her shoulder, and I said, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" And she being a little bit wiser than I had expected, answered appropriately and knew what God had told Adam, what God had told man. And I couldn't have this. I needed to force her to eat the fruit. So we approached the tree even closer, and all of a sudden you saw the fruit, and it was a beautiful fruit. It was an apple. It's a joke, guys. This is a mango. It's not an apple. So we approached the mango tree, and I said to her, "You will not certainly die, for God knows that when you eat, your eyes will be opened. You will be like God, knowing good and evil." And I knew right away she was sold. She wanted that fruit. She wanted that mango. But I took it even further, and I started describing its properties and how good it looked and its color. And, ooh, would you just smell it? Let's take a smell of that. That's a good smelling fruit right there. So she was hooked. And not only did I deceive her, I deceived man too. He stood there listening. He stood there and he knew firsthand God said not to do it. But he took a bite too. I was the craftiest animal in the garden. What can I say? So they eat, and instantly I see things start to change about them. Instantly, God's presence seemed less about them. The eyes seemed open, and they seemed more aware and more knowledgeable. And a part of me really liked it, but at the same time I got a little scared, so I ran up a tree again. And as I was running up the tree, they were putting on these leaves, and God's voice was heard in the garden once more. And he started conversing with man and woman, and he started like disagreeing in a sense. There was this fight, there was this conflict, there was this gap. They weren't one with each other anymore. God and man had a separation at this point. Man and woman had a separation, because man turned and pointed at woman, and let me tell you, it was the greatest show of all time. Okay? I don't know what shows you guys like to watch, but I was looking for popcorn in this moment, because all hell was breaking loose in the garden, and it was glorious. So I'm sitting up in my tree chilling, watching all this unfold, and I got caught. God called me out and cursed me. I was cursed above all the livestock, all the animals of the earth. I lost my mighty arms and was cursed to be on my belly, which chiseled my face, and I lost my mustache, and it grinded my head down into a nub. And not only that, I was forced to eat dirt, which is disgusting. And that was me now, the serpent, on his belly, eating dirt, cursed above all the animals of the earth. And humans now hated me. They were hostile towards me, which forced me to go into hiding, even to this day, because if I go near them, they try to crush my head. And some animals will come up to me and ask me, do I regret it? Was it a mistake? And it was. I messed up. I am now known as the serpent who destroyed the earth, but someone was telling me, I'm not even known as serpent anymore. Some people call me Satan. And I'm serpent. But this is how I'm remembered until the end of the earth. This is how I'm remembered all the way to today, by my mistakes. I caused 4 broken relationships that day. I broke the relationship between man and God. I broke the relationship between man inside of himself, just alone. I broke the relationship between man and woman, and I broke the relationship between man and nature, or earth. And at that moment it was great, but now I regret it, and I wish I hadn't. The relationship between man was broken within, because now there's hurt, there's pain, there's sorrow, there's crying. There is this emptiness and a void inside of them where they feel like they're missing something. The relationship between man and woman was broken because instantly in that moment, man accused woman. Man said it was her fault, and it created a disagreement. And then there was a curse on them where there was a hierarchical system put in place where they were no longer equals. They were no longer brothers and sisters one with each other. There was this separation. And the separation, it creates a naming from man to woman. Man then turns and names woman Eve. So now we have man and Eve. And Eve meant giver of life. Man named her based off of her job. He placed her identity in what she did instead of who she was. And it broke that relationship between them, and this brokenness continued as she gave life to Cain and Abel, and Cain killed Abel. And this brokenness continues all the way to today, where there's wars and there's hatred and there's a lack of love. And this brokenness in relationship didn't end there. It broke between God and man. God and man now had sin in between them. It was no longer one. It was no longer whole. There was this void in between where they could no longer see face to face. They could no longer be directly in each other's presence because sin was present. Sin had occurred. And then there was the broken relationship between man and earth. And you're probably wondering what this one is. We die. God said you will die. Now we die. Before we were eating from you guys were eating from the tree of life. And now you don't. You were banned from that tree. Man no longer eats from that tree. You now experience death. Your relationship with nature has illness and sickness. It has death. You guys will die eventually on earth. But these relationships are something that you will constantly try to mend. But no man can restore or forget what they lost. You will spend every day of your life trying to fulfill and reconcile this relationship. Whether you know it or not, you are going to try and fill these voids. Fortunately, God sent a man to come and undo my mistakes. A man who came and filled that void, reconciled you back to this love. His name was Jesus. He died the death you guys deserved, and he rose from the grave. Jesus restores all four of those broken relationships. He restores the broken relationship from within you by filling you with love. He places an identity on you of love. He fills that sorrow and that brokenness in his name. He makes you reborn anew again. You no longer have to carry around chain and burden. He restores the relationship between man and woman. No longer should there be a hierarchical system. You guys are equals. You're brothers and sisters in Christ. You are unified together in his name. No longer is there a broken relationship between you and God. He killed the gap. He died the death you deserved. He resurrected from the grave. The sins that you once carried and the shame you once held is now gone. It died on that cross and stayed on that cross. And then he mended that relationship between you and nature or earth. You now have the opportunity to eat from the tree of life again. By accepting him as Lord and Savior in your life, you can now go to heaven and eat from that tree of life. You can now experience a hope and a fulfillment that you once didn't have. And Jesus restored that relationship by dying on the cross. So, you need to understand that it's not about you, it's not about me, but it's about Jesus. You can't go to him without accepting him as Lord and Savior. He was the one who mended all those broken relationships. Without him, you will live in that brokenness. You will live in that hurt and that pain, and you will live filled with sorrow, seeking a fulfillment that you'll never find. So I encourage you, don't be like me. Don't be like man or woman. Be like Jesus. Accept him. If you're going to go against what God has called you to, if you're going to be led astray, which you have been already, you're going to be hurt. You're going to be disappointed. But it's never too late to turn to Jesus. It's never too late to be made new. So I encourage you to accept him, love him, and obey him.